Okay, we'd like to welcome everybody to our session today. We're going to be talking about some Second Amendment rights, Q&A, questions and answers from a special guest, William Kirk of WashingtonGunLaw.com. We're going to bring him in now. And how are you doing today with Mr. Kirk?
Professor,
What do you prefer?
how are you doing? Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Pretty good, pretty good. What do you prefer to be called?
Oh, I go by Bill today.
Okay, Bill. All right, so Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's William Kirk, Attorney William Kirk, go by Bill. I am the president of a company here called Washington Gun Law. I'm a licensed attorney in Washington State. Been a licensed defense attorney for about 22 years. Spent the first 4 years of my legal career as a King County prosecutor here in Seattle, Washington. Cut my teeth doing trial work, mostly drunk driving cases. About 6 years ago, started specializing in self-defense and Second Amendment cases. Built out Washington Gun Law as a law firm dedicated to that cause, and then started a YouTube channel about a year and a half ago, and it's been a real exciting journey on that. We've grown the channel up to 100,000 plus subscribers now, and our job is really just there to educate lawful and responsible gun owners around the nation as to where the laws are and how they're ever changing, so that we can continue to try to color inside the lines.
Sounds good, sounds good. Okay, so let's get started, and then we're pretty much we'll freestyle as we go with the questions. We're going to start off with the basics. Some of the questions may seem redundant, however, they get a little bit elaborate, and I'm sure that you'll break down from your point of view or perspective what we're dealing with. Okay, so the first question, and these are common questions that come from throughout the 2A network, from the person that just wants to support to the professional that's been in it for a while, and everybody's doing their own thing on their own platform. Some people are range owners, others are FFLs, others are just advocates in general, and obviously this whole set is about bringing up the attention to all of our media, which obviously this year has been off the chain as far as all the new potential regulations, whether it be from the ATF or whether it be from the government in general, or our President Biden, who basically is pretty much anti-Second Amendment, according to his statements. All right, so the first question is, what does the Second Amendment fully say? How can a common person find this text, and how long is it? This is the general,
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, the Second Amendment's very easy to find. All you have to do is Google Second Amendment. It's found right there in the Bill of Rights. It is Amendment number 2. I think it is put there for a reason in the number 2 spot. I don't think that's coincidence. It comes right after the First Amendment, which provides us with the ability to speak freely, challenge our governments, go to whatever church we want. And the Second Amendment allows us to guarantee that we are able to preserve that right. What the amendment actually states is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's only 27 words long, and obviously the section that most people in the 2A community will focus on is shall not be infringed. And I think the reason they emphasize that is that there is no other constitutional amendment that has such bold and strong language in there as to the inability to infringe upon it that the Second Amendment does.
Okay, awesome. And the reason why, again, obviously, sometimes the most obvious is the most important of all things. Anybody that knows, that watches our channel, they know that that whole statement is on the channel, up and down, including some of the media and the material.
And I think that what a lot of people in the 2A community always want to focus on is shall not be infringed, shall not be infringed. I can't tell you how many comments I get on my YouTube channel. And what those in the gun control community will say is that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state is a condition precedent to a person having individual rights to bear arms. Now, that was the exact argument that was offered in Heller versus District of Columbia and soundly rejected by the majority there, but that doesn't stop those on the gun-grabbing left from making that argument. What I would suggest your viewers focus on, though, is the part that comes right after the comma, which is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so any notion that there is a condition precedent of a well-regulated militia, you having to be a member of a militia in order to have that right, is simply just not supported even by plain English.
Awesome. Very well stated. The next statement is, do states with strict gun laws have less gun violence? That's a general.
Yeah. You know, there's a professor, one of the things that a college professor in statistics taught me right before we took our final is that the only thing that statistics have ever accurately proven is that women have more babies than men. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think statistics can be skewed in however you want. The bottom line is this, is if we take a look around the country at some of the cities who have the strictest gun control measures anywhere in the country. Let's
Absolutely.
take Chicago. Let's take New York. Let's take San Francisco. Let's take any city in New Jersey. Do we see a considerably less gun violence problems in those cities than we do see in others? And the answer is absolutely not. Chicago is a freaking war zone right now. Okay,
Absolutely.
and Illinois has some of the most restrictive gun measures anywhere in the country. Lori Lightfoot has certainly declared war on lawful and responsible gun owners, and yet you can pick up the Chicago Tribune every Monday morning and see how many people got slaughtered over the weekend, and most of them, unfortunately, are young people of color that are getting slaughtered there. And so, no, for anyone who suggests that these types of laws are saving lives, it's just simply not true. I did a video about 6 months ago on the channel, and it was basically using Department of Justice statistics, okay? I get what I said about statistics earlier, but I'm using their own data. And what they said is, hey, 88.8% of all gun crimes committed in the United States are committed by a person who is unlawfully possessing the firearm at the time that the crime is committed. So do we write 88.8% of our gun laws to affect that particular demographic group? No, we don't. We write 100% of our gun laws to affect people like you and me, lawful, responsible gun owners. And that's where I'm not going to sit here and claim that we don't have a violence problem in this country, but the solutions that some people on the political left are coming up with has nothing to do with saving lives. Gun control rarely has anything to do with the guns and everything to do with the control.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And, you know, like I say, we just want sometimes perspectives from different people. That's why we ask you these questions, as I've heard it throughout the gun industry and 2A activists, right? It's the same information across the board. You know, like you say, California, pick a state, you know, that regulates that. And we got some other questions coming up soon, but I'm not going to rush on it. The next one is why some states are considered free and others are not. Is this actually a fact or a thing to be a free state?
Yeah. So that is a real thing, and I think that in some ways our country was designed to function that way. That is why we chose to have independent states with a federal government and then a state government. And remember that the 10th Amendment says that all powers not reserved to the federal government are now for the state to implement. So I do think it's one of the unique things that makes the United States such an amazing country, that you can go from state to state and have entirely different cultures, entirely different languages, entirely different cuisine, and yes, entirely different political ways of viewing things. And there is no doubt that states which tend to be darker red have a tendency to, you get to live a little bit more free like an American in those states, and states that tend to be very deep blue, there tends to be a lot of restrictions, especially as it relates to Second Amendment issues, because it is clearly a disfavored right in those liberal jurisdictions.
Interesting. Before we go to the next question, we're going to expound on that just a little bit more. What you said is very, very, very intelligently put. So with that being said, our, not just the Second Amendment, but all the amendments put together, obviously they should balance out each other in everything that we do. With that being said, from the state's differentiation of what we do pertaining to those amendments and to the Constitution, etc., how is that balanced with the ability to have your state's freeness, but yet abiding within that?
Yeah. So the bottom line is that the federal Constitution serves as the floor. That is the basic rights that we are all guaranteed. Now, states can actually guarantee more protections to individuals. For example, there is clear case law out here in Washington State that our Fourth Amendment rights under Article 1, Section 7 of the Washington State Constitution are far greater than the federal counterpart. there's even a plausible argument that our Article 1, Section 24 rights, which are our rights to keep and bear arms, may actually have much more accommodating language in that than the federal counterpart. So you have these situations where you can actually have more protections, but the federal Constitution is the ultimate floor on that. Now, what you see in the 2A community, though, is you see varying different levels of understanding as to what infringements can be made upon a person's Second Amendment rights before we go too far into unconstitutional territory. And that whole landscape has changed significantly since this past summer with a big case that came out of the United States Supreme Court. And what we're seeing now is I think we're seeing states like New York, New Jersey, California, Oregon. Oregon's ballot measure 114 that just passed, just was about to go into effect next week. They are literally thumbing their nose. They are literally saying, listen, we know what the Constitution says. We know what the Supreme Court says, but we're going to do this anyways.
Yeah, and I've been following that through some of your media, and also the gentleman that we were talking about earlier from California, who's Scholar.
Scholar.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a great job on the channel too. He does a really
Yeah,
good job on the
yeah.
material.
Love the info. Love the information.
Yeah, great.
With that being said, also it takes us into one of the next phases. How does anything become law that already is against any current amendments or Constitution without any additional amendments being made to that?
Right.
And or how is it fought against if that's the case?
Right. So, as you probably aware, I just did a video a couple weeks ago. It's called "What Happens When Your State Legislatures Knowingly Pass Unconstitutional Laws?"
Absolutely.
And the question is can we do anything about that from a civil liability standpoint? And unfortunately, there's this pesky little thing called the 11th Amendment that kind of gets in the way of doing that. But let me start with your first question, which is how do things become law? Because I think it's different in the in the gun community when we talk about state versus federal. Okay, let's start at the bottom and work our way up.
Okay.
At the state level, you will get laws that are actually created by your state legislature. Sometimes there's initiative process, ballot measure processes, and things like that. But it actually goes through a true legislative process. In Washington State this past legislative session, we got a high capacity magazine ban shoved down our throat. We got some new restrictions on untraceable firearms. We got some new restrictions on where we can carry firearms. Now, as critical as I've been of that legislation, I will give the state of Washington one piece of credit, which is at least they passed it through an actual legislative process as announced in our state constitution, okay? Mm-hmm. What we see on the federal level is entirely different. And this is what draws the ire of so many individuals to the ATF, okay? Is that on the federal level, the Congress has essentially delegated that authority to the ATF. The ATF basically does not pass new laws. There hasn't been any new gun laws passed in the United States in years. What the ATF does is just come up with reinterpretations of pre-existing laws. And those interpretations flow with the political wind of whichever administration is in control of that agency at that point. And so what we're seeing in the last couple of years is obviously a very concerted effort out of this presidential administration to disarm the American public. And we've seen essentially the ATF being turned loose like some kind of an attack dog being let off its leash with the edict of when in doubt, reject applications, when in doubt, interpret the statutes and the rules to be in favor of the government and against the gun owner. And we're seeing all sorts of new and creative interpretations on frames and receivers, on stabilizing braces, on what constitutes a machine gun, on what constitutes a suppressor. And every one of those rulings made by ATF is designed to disarm American people. If Congress was doing that through actual legislation, well, that's the way laws are meant to be passed. Okay, that's the way our whole constitutional structure is set up. But Congress has become so feckless as it comes to gun legislation, both pro-gun, gun rights and gun control legislation, that the only way this administration can get anything done, especially because of the light of the fact that they've lost any clout to get any type of significant legislation done, is to sick their little pit bull ATF on individuals. And that's exactly what we're seeing. For example, we've had something like 220 FFLs lose their license this year for bookkeeping errors and things like that nationwide. On average, 17 FFLs lost a license a year, about 1.5 a month. Now we're at 200 already this year. Do we really honestly think that the FFLs around the country are suddenly become much more sloppy? Is ATF and the federal government just expanding upon this? So you see a real dichotomy in the way laws are passed at the state level, which is typically done through representative government, versus the federal level, where it is not done according to representative government.
Interesting. Yeah. Very good point. Now, aside from some of the other questions that we got, some of the questions I'm going to pose is based on what you just said. That brought up something to me when you're talking about the FFLs. So, with that minusing per year of FFLs that are taken out of operation due to whatever violations and stuff like that, what is the encouragement in the 2A community? Like again, like I said, whether it's a range, whether it's another FFL being made, etc., that can actually increase those depreciating numbers, such as new registers coming up for more FFLs that have better laws and new clients and stuff like that. What's your opinion on that side?
I think that anything within that industry that makes firearms available to lawful and responsible citizens is good for public safety, and it is good for our constitutional rights. Whether or not the federal government is willing to grant FFLs as easily as they once did, I think is probably questionable right now. And I think that in many ways, what we see in the gun control community is when that pesky little thing like the Constitution gets in the way from just stripping us of our rights, what they do is they try to put up financial roadblocks. They try to basically price people out of the ability to arm themselves. And what really offends me the most about those on the gun-grabbing left is that they claim that they are the ones looking out for the underprivileged, disadvantaged communities. And yet, when you're driving the cost of self-defense up through the ceiling, the first communities that you affect are, in fact, those underprivileged communities, which
Correct.
in many ways are also the neighborhoods that people need the most protection in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that you said on that stirs up the next question. What is gun control and its origins? Now, when I ask that question, it's coming from the perspective, obviously, if we look at the foundation of the country, the writings, the amendments, etc. Where did that first get introduced?
Okay. Well, this is a bit of a loaded topic because if the true academic answer, okay, if we're just going to give the vanilla academic answer, is gun control was created in 1934 through the Gun Control Act of 1934, which was in response to the gangster problem, the mafia problem we had. It was an ability to control the Tommy gun, okay? That's what the generic answer is. But if you really, really want to take the Band-Aid off and take a look at the scab, gun control is rooted in 1800 racism. Okay? The first forms of gun control in this country were passed in the 1800s, and who do you suppose was the demographic group that was prohibited from possessing a firearm? It was the African American community. Okay? And even after 1865, even after the Emancipation Proclamation, even after the end of the Civil War, there were still several states that forbid African Americans from possessing firearms. That's the earliest forms of gun control. So when you see people say gun control was founded in racism, it's actually an accurate statement. It was, okay? From a federal legislative standpoint, the first example is the Gun Control Act of 1934. But from a historical perspective, no. It's rooted in, it goes back to the 1800s, and it's deeply, deeply rooted in racism.
Absolutely. Okay. Very good statement. Which brings me, this is not a question that was written, but it stirred another question point on that. What do you think about our current time that we're in right now, 2022, forward, back no further than a year, how that same outlook may be for right now based on that statement?
Well, this is my biggest concern about what's happened to us in the last 24, 12 months or whatever, okay? We clearly have an administration that is hell-bent on disarming American citizens.
Absolutely.
We also have many, many local governments that are hell-bent on defunding their police departments. And so what we are beginning to see now is a situation where, shockingly, when we do that, crime goes up. And so we're having our rights attacked from the top, we're having our rights eroded from the bottom, and at the same time, the very governments that are tasked with protecting our communities are either unwilling or incapable of doing so. And so what we have seen now is this massive panic buy. In Washington State, little old Washington State alone, since 2020, we have over 200,000 new gun owners in our state alone. Not a particularly red state, by the way, okay? Down in Oregon right now, Oregon was averaging 891 background checks a month. They're averaging over 6,000 a month right now because of this new gun legislation they have going in. So government is incredibly responsible for creating the very situation that we are in, that have so many people terrified that they finally have to come to the conclusion that I need to defend myself. I can't depend on somebody else to do it for me.
Gotcha. Very perfect point. That brings me up to one of the next questions, which is based on the legal process of that. I can't defend myself, or whether I need to defend myself. What resources do I have? So the question is, because we have a Second Amendment, why is a state prosecutor always more competent than a state defender, aka public defender, as both are government state appointed in that process? Why aren't the resources equal?
Yeah. So I can only speak from my personal experience in the jurisdictions that I practice. And I do recognize that public defenders on a national level get a bad rap. I will tell you that the quality of public defense in King County, where I practice predominantly, is really, really good. Really good. And I got some amazingly competent attorneys. In fact, there's some that are actually quite damn good. I think in general, there is definitely a reallocation of resources. There is more money that's put into prosecution than in public defense. But even the most talented attorney on the planet cannot be that good when they have 350 open cases. And it's the workload that really keeps the public defenders from being able to do the good, creative work that they need to do on some cases. It's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't try. It's just that where I may have 45, 50 open files at any one point, a public defender may have 300 to 400 open files. How you manage those cases, how you do the special work that's necessary to go into each of those cases, it's chronologically impossible. Now, I know in other jurisdictions, I've heard some pretty horrible stories about really poorly funded public defense, incompetent lawyers who are just nothing but plea mills. And that's going to continue until there is a general public outrage on this. And one of the things I would also point out is that I think there is a huge, when we're talking about inadequate public defense, there is a huge racial disparity in the impact that has on the system. There are more people of color. There are more people who are going to be gamed by the system if they have an incompetent public defender. And yet all of these organizations that are claiming to fight for justice, all they want is justice for everybody. And I am a huge proponent of equal justice for everybody under the law. Then there needs to be more resources put into government public defense. It just does.
Agree. Yeah, definitely agree. And I've seen and heard some of the equal stories. I did a lot of work in IT and DOD and stuff like that, but I actually worked with a couple of laws that I think they regulated mostly like state real estate or something like that. I just did a lot of the IT for them and everything, and so I was privy to some of how things worked just in that environment a little bit, to get familiar with that whole law process on in their own field and stuff like that, which is why we're going to pose another question based on which your law office and law offices like yours, and then advocate companies like I heard you talking about on one of the comments of the I think it was the Oregon laws and stuff like that, that there are organizations that have filed suits against
and Professor, thanks for bringing this up, because I do appreciate this. I think that in the 2A community, everyone always immediately thinks of the NRA, okay? And the NRA certainly dominates the discussion. And we could do probably a whole session on the NRA alone. The bottom line is as an attorney that fights for the rights of individuals, I pay attention to who else is fighting along my side. And what I see is four organizations, I should say, I'm going to name them here in a moment, that are consistently, the named plaintiffs, consistently jumping into the trenches, fighting for individual rights regardless of what state it's in. You'll find these people in every single state fighting like hell for Second Amendment rights, and they are as follows. Number one, the Gun Owners of America. Fantastic organization, huge legal department, they do fantastic work. Number two, Firearms Policy Coalition. Okay, Firearms Policy Coalition probably has a suit right now in every state. That's how active they are in the court system. Third organization, one that's local organization here, Second Amendment Foundation, Alan Gottlieb. Again, I bet you Second Amendment Foundation has probably filed suit in every state in the last 10 years, currently probably has suits in 20, 25 states. And then a local organization here in Washington that I've become real familiar with in the last couple of years, and they've been doing a lot of work here in Oregon and Washington. It's an organization called the Silent Majority Foundation. And so if people are looking to put money into an organization that is really out there actually fighting for your rights, that is doing the dirty work to preserve your rights, those are four worthwhile organizations where I think that your money is going to be incredibly well spent, and it is going to advance your constitutional rights.
Now, is that state to state? Are they based in a certain state, or they have organizations
The first
within
three
each?
I mentioned, Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundation, they have corporate headquarters in individual states, but no, they do work nationwide. And Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundations, I know they have branch offices all around the country.
Okay, awesome. That actually kind of opens up to some of the other questions that we had about the advocate race, the fight. Some of the questions, I'll just put them out there as we had this conversation. What legal advice would you give on how people should protect their Second Amendment right? Proper processes to doing so, to start doing it. How to organize or how to join with organizations. And I'm saying all of this because you're answering some of those questions in some of your statement to those foundations. We got a couple of more. All right, who and what to join versus organizations. When you get a chance, I want you to send me an email of all of those lists. I'm going to post them in this video so people can have that access. And that can definitely be started. And I think the last one was, how can we best link state to state Second Amendment resources to fight the fight, which is, it goes into all the other questions. The organizations best to join.
Let me take that in reverse order. Let me talk about these organizations one more time real quick. So again, it's Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundation, Silent Majority Foundation. Thumbs up to both of them. I will get you links to all of those. And these are organizations that share resources. These are organizations who can, like, for example, I was on the phone today with Silent Majority Foundation, and we were setting up a conference call with the Second Amendment Foundation. Now, that's 3 Washington attorneys getting together to talk about litigation that we're going to do in Oregon, okay? And because, listen, my Second Amendment rights are your Second Amendment rights or their Second Amendment rights. We all are in this together. So that is why I really appreciate these organizations, because no one's out looking for all the glory here with these organizations, right? It's kind of that whole, we're always capable of doing great things if no one cares who gets the credit for it, right? And that's what I really like about these organizations is they're all about the results, not about the glory for themselves. So being involved, giving money, giving time, volunteering time, those are wonderful things that can be done to help advance the cause of the Second Amendment. The other thing that I think is huge to advancing the cause of the Second Amendment, and this is a responsibility of every lawful and responsible gun owner nationwide, is that when you take a look at some of the positions that those on the gun-grabbing left take, and you take a look at their knowledge of firearms, or most often the complete lack of knowledge of firearms, they are writing laws based on urban legends and things like that that have nothing to do with the practical application of a firearm. And we so routinely see laws that are written by people who have no idea what they're talking about, but then the voters go out and vote for them because they have no idea what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
Okay? And it is our job, this Second Amendment debate's been going on forever, will continue to go. Are we going to solve it through litigation? Are we going to solve it through intimidation? Are we going to solve it through frustration? No, I think we're going to solve it through education. And I think that what we in the gun owning community have a responsibility to do is to go out and find our friends who don't know anything about this and get them educated. Get them up to the range. Let them pull the trigger once or twice. Let them learn that it's not this big, terrible thing that only bad people do. Learn to value your life. Learn to value your family's life. Learn to realize that really in many ways, you and you alone are responsible for protecting yourself and your family. And it's that kind of educational lessons that I think will get people to open up their eyes to, you know, there actually is a lot of usefulness for firearms. I've always said, if you really wanted to change the gun control debate in this country, arm all the soccer moms for a year, and then after a year, talk about taking the guns away from them. See how they react to that.
Yeah, I think that's all of our views. that to believe in the Second
That's a
Amendment.
biological reaction at that point. That is mama bear instinct, and there ain't no change in that, you know?
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
for a gun owner, this is the thing, and this is the whole reason we do Washington gun law, and I teach this in all my classes where I run around the country and teach on self-defense laws. I tell everybody this, which is good, lawful, responsible gun owners go to the range all the time, and they practice on all the things they need to do to make sure they don't go to the morgue. Awesome. How many of them go and do all the work to make sure that they don't go to prison? And that's the thing that you need to do if you really want to be the lawful and responsible gun owner, is you need to routinely go and brush up on the law to know how the law works. And it's got to be subconscious, because if all of a sudden the collective you-know-what is hitting the fan, and all hell's breaking loose, and we're thinking about, do I pull my firearm? Do I shoot? What do I do? You know, we're not going to have time to pull out a little pocket legal dictionary and go through and figure out, or get on YouTube and, hey, what did Bill say about that, right? It's got to be programmed subconsciously into our head. So what I encourage everybody to do, regardless of what part of the country you're in, is once a year, go to a self-defense law class taught by a lawyer and just reprogram your brain about the use of force and how it works in your state. Practice to keep out of the morgue. Practice to keep yourself out of prison also.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that point, because it's going to take me back to your introduction to Washington gun law, what you guys do. In addition, an add-on question to that is, okay, some people, they know about the UCCA and some of the other insurances that you can get. Are you guys, in a short term, like one of the lawyers, except in your state, that actually fight for those organizations, those protection organizations
So
in litigation?
I am the program attorney for U.S. Law Shield here in Washington State. So if
Gotcha,
you are a member of U.S. Law Shield, I am the program attorney. And we have some very goofy laws in Washington State that makes it right now really hard to do business. Well, it doesn't make it hard to do business. It makes it trickier. Law Shield set it up. I don't know why no one else has. But between you and me, Professor, I try not to even really talk about that product, not because I don't believe in it, but because I'm a lawyer who wants to educate, and I'll leave the sales up to people who want to be salespeople. I think that lawyers that act like car salesmen don't really look that good. So I'm going to stick with the educational stuff. But no matter what part of the country are you in, if you're interested in some type of self-defense concealed carry insurance, yeah, you should absolutely do your homework. You should call these organizations. You should ask them the tough questions to make sure it's worth your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other point that for me asking that is, say this. Okay, so like what we're doing right now, we're bringing out issues, Second Amendment issues, basic questions that sometimes, common sense is not so common. How could individuals like myself who are advocates, so we're an advocate channel, our main focus as far as information, we do reviews on equipment, and we do safety. We'll be doing like a lot of safety videos, best practices, things like that. But we need more resources, not only from individuals who I might have insurance from, or because everybody has different insurances and things and different policies that they can reach into. What can we reach into without reaching outside of your pocket as a paid lawyer, to get resources, like you're saying, of just common sense training, awareness, and things, and that way the average Second Amendment right gun holder, gun believer in gun law could have access to that type of material that won't exhaust, because practicality, we all have to make a living, things like that.
Yeah, no,
so we don't want to take,
absolutely.
lawyers' resources and be like, oh, well, I mean, we can sit here and get all kinds of counsel and then, oh, maybe we'll win a case just off of what William told us. But no. We want you to make a living because you guys exist for the purpose of us to be able to exist without, going to court the wrong way and being prosecuted for something that we shouldn't even be prosecuted for, just like all the
Right.
fights now and stuff.
Right.
So what kind of resources can we
So
grab?
I think on a local level, what everyone needs to look for is, you're going to have gun clubs, and there are some gun clubs that are all about shooting, and there are other gun clubs that are about anything. I've become associated with a local gun club here in the Seattle area because what sets them apart is their real dedication to education. They are really, really trying to educate people about all aspects, not only of firearm safety, tactical stuff, but also on the legal side of things. And I know that every community is going to have some range that is really, really dedicated to that. And that's where people should start forming relationships. Form relationships with the ranges that really are dedicated to that. And form relationships with ranges where you got a lot of old timers. The guys that have been around guns 40, 50 years, maybe fourth generation of a gun family, because they know everything there is to know about firearms. And they also know everything there is to know about firearm safety, which is one of the most critical things. And I think that, what gives the gun grabbing left material to work with is really just two things. It's mass shootings, and then it's all the stupid crap that happens with guns. It's the person who leaves the gun around and the 6-year-old shoots the 3-year-old. It's the guy who leaves the loaded gun unsecured in the car that goes off and shoots the kid in the back seat. It's the guy who accidentally has a discharge at a McDonald's, okay? That gives the gun control community a lot to talk about. See, these people can't be trusted with these things. Now, as lawful and responsible gun owners, we can't do anything about the mass shooters, okay? They're nuts, okay? And that's a loaded issue that we could probably talk for hours on. But we can do a lot to prevent all of the stupid things that happen with firearms. All the thefts of firearms. Many firearms that are stolen were stolen because they were left unsecured, right? Mm-hmm. So as lawful and responsible gun owners, we need to become more mindful. When you become an everyday carrier, life is no longer a game of checkers. It's not about the next move. It's about what's going to happen 10 moves from now. And you need to be mindful. For every action, there is an equal chain reaction. So think about all of those things. And if we could really significantly cut down on all the stupid, unnecessary things that happen with firearms, and now we're only dealing with real criminals, well, we're about halfway to where we need to be at that point.
Great. Is there anything on your website off the top of the hand that you would comment on, like just common resources that people can go to your website?
My website, which is WashingtonGunLaw.com, really is helpful for people in Washington State. That's kind of the whole resource for that. However, my YouTube channel, I covered most of Washington State in about 6 months, and until my legislature gets back into session next month, they're not going to give me any material to work with. But as for all of the things that are going on with the ATF right now on a national level, which it really affects everybody, no matter what state you're in, the Washington Gun Law on YouTube is an excellent resource, I think, for trying to get good, objective information. I think that one of the things that we try to do at Washington Gun Law, and there's a lot of people out there in the YouTuberverse that are doing 2A content, and there's a lot of people who will on there will be like, well, I'm not a lawyer, but let me give you some advice anyways. And then there are a lot of other people out there screaming, all gun laws are unconstitutional, disobey, we shall not comply. And that's fine. Their material all serves a purpose, okay? What we're trying to do at Washington Gun Law is kind of stick it right down the middle, give you really, really objective information, and then you guys all get to decide what that means to you. And you guys all get to decide what your level of compliance is going to be. I don't want to try to tell people how to think. I just want to tell them, here's some stuff to think about. And that's kind of what we're doing at Washington Gun Law. And these laws can be so horribly written that a lot of times what we do is we just interpret them for our English-speaking friends so they understand what really are the do's and don'ts under this law.
Absolutely. Very, very good. Which brings us also to this major question. And it's, warn you in advance, it's a loaded question. Obviously, legality can go left or right to it, but I'm going to just give it to you. At what point would it make sense other than past history, obviously the British invasion, Civil War, etc., that affects us, to actually legally have to declare usage of the Second Amendment in its entirety. You understand where we're coming from? Like,
Yeah, I know exactly where you're going with this. I know exactly where you're going.
I'm gonna let you go with it
When does
then.
hit the fan so bad that we finally pull the ripcord and say, you know, enough of this, we're going to take back our government? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What circumstances
I gotta be
legally?
careful about answering this question. I
Yes.
gotta be careful about answering this question because I do have a bar association that monitors what I say, and advocating for the overthrowing of the American government will probably be shunned upon by the Washington State Bar Association. However,
Duly understood.
And we've never gotten to that precipice. And this is the most alarming thing, Professor, that what you and I are talking about, is that we're actually having a serious conversation about this, aren't we? Mm-hmm. That's the thing that scares me the most. This isn't like, oh, let's talk some crazy hypothetical like we do in law school. This is like, no, because there are a lot of Americans who are getting to that point already. Do I think that violence is ever really the solution to problems? No, it's not, but I will point out that our founding fathers created the Second Amendment for this exact reason.
Exactly.
And it's articulated right in the Constitution that, hey, you know, because let's face it, they've just gotten through a nasty divorce with a pretty oppressive government, okay?
Yeah.
And so they still had that bad taste in their mouth when they decided to set up this new government. They're kind of like, hey, we kind of need a cancellation clause for the new government in case it ever gets like the old one. And that's why the Second Amendment is there. That's why the First Amendment is there, so that you can speak out against your government.
Exactly. Now, I'm again, like I said, because that was a loaded question. I just wanted your overall point of view, because a lot of other people who are more free to speak, I don't have to worry about any being barred.
A lot of people who are freer to speak might tell you that the time is now.
And that's why we're getting these resources.
But I will say this: if House Resolution 1808, that's passed out of the House of Representatives, is passed out of the United States Senate and signed by President Biden, that will outlaw about 90% of the firearms that are currently in circulation in the United States with no grandfathering clause whatsoever.
Yeah, I've been watching that thing, and that's why.
Is that going to be the time when the public? It could be, because that is such a grotesque violation of and this is the thing that I want all your viewers to understand. We call these things constitutional rights, but if you really geek out on the text of the Constitution, what the Second Amendment doesn't give you the right to keep and bear arms. God gave you that right when you were born.
Absolutely.
These are inalienable rights that you were born with. What the Second Amendment says is government can't take it from you.
Yeah,
Just
we
like
acknowledge what God did.
Your
Exactly.
right to practice whatever religion you want. Those were rights that you were born with. Your Creator gave you those rights. Government can't take them from you.
Exactly. And so, some of the reasons, which obviously you already know, why that type of question is because in two parts, not just the fight, the physical war side, that it's possible for such a thing like that to happen, but the very reason that we got started is because, you know, after a while it's like, you know what, these channels are pretty good. You know, Watching the Gun Law is good. You know, our LA family is good. All the other resources that, you know, are arguing this case and good. But you know, it's too much going on and it's too many laws being passed right now. What can we do? And that was our creation. I mean, we already been an advocate aside from that, but this made us specifically, you know what, we're going to set aside a formal channel discussion and information for these type of things. Like, I think one of the things on your Oregon comment, they were talking about like introducing all this legislation. I think it's on the current one that's put on hold. The one, is it 114 or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, ballot 114. And that's just a total cluster, you know what, but there's a temporary stay on one aspect of it. Then there was an injunction that was denied by the federal court, but granted by a state court. And so it's I got to go online here in a minute and check and see what happened today. I probably got another video to shoot tonight about the damn thing.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of days. So with that being said, obviously we have questions like say I'm not there, so I'm not affected by that immediately. Obviously we're always affected by it, but I'm not affected by that immediately. However, if I was there, I would be like, what do I need to do? Why was this so expedited, and why is there a law process that when you write up this whole process of what you want the people to do, that you get some people to agree with, why is it not an absolute requirement that you're able to fulfill the things that they're not able to fulfill, which is one of the reasons why y'all was able to get, a hold on certain things, because the police
Right.
can't execute, etc.
Well, one of the things, Professor, when I was geeking out on the subject and I started taking a look at the Oregon State Constitution and how they do these ballot measures, shockingly, you can write a ballot measure, you can pass a ballot measure, and nobody is required to come up with the funding for it. I was like, wow, that's amazing, because the state of Oregon just came up with a whole new licensing thing requiring both in-person and written examinations involving every single law enforcement agency in the state of Oregon, and they didn't think there would be a price tag on that?
Yeah, kind of like New Jersey.
So-
I was looking at
Yeah.
some of the bullet points that they were discussing, and there was like, well, what did you come up? The lady who's not even she understands our right. I forget her name, but she was speaking in between. Not all the way on the anti-gun side and not all the way on the pro-gun side, but she respected the pro-gun side, and she was like, I'm not going to register for this because that's just me. But I'm curious, what statistics did you do to come up with the prices that are needed for the people to pay and to go to their police? I think they have to go to like a police station to apply.
Yeah, they got to do
certain
live fire training. They actually have to do live fire training, which is if you're a first-time gun buyer, you can't actually get a gun to do the live fire training.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, and Professor, I think this is another point that you raised that's really good. Is what you're seeing in a lot of jurisdictions, California is notorious for this, is where they can't quite get to the guns. They want to get to the system and to make it so cost prohibitive that people just go, you know what, it's not even worth it to me. And so what do I think is going to happen in Oregon? Well, the entire funding for this whole licensing program, this fiasco, it's going to come out of the consumers' pockets. That's where it's going to come.
Mm-hmm. And so, we're going to give a fictitious forecast, in your opinion, your legal opinion, to that situation. So let's say, forget where the hopes are right now, as far as the state has been put on the Oregon stuff and everything. Let's say everything gets passed. People are upset. People are ready to fight. Not physically, but, legislation. That people are ready to, do whatever process they need to do. We're stuck in this rut as Oregons, and what do we do 6 months down the line? All of your proposals is not making sense to us, and it's not helping us. It's not doing right. How do we make any adjustments at that point, if possible, at all?
That's a difficult question, because it's hard for me just to tell people, hey, just don't, the law is constitutional. You don't believe it's lawful. You don't believe it solves anything. I agree with all of those sentiments. But as a lawyer, I just can't tell people to willfully violate the law. I think the one thing that we got going for us right now is we have a Supreme Court that is well situated to protect our Second Amendment rights, and also appears to be very willing to finally hear Supreme Court cases again. I have a feeling that between some of these ballot measures, this New Jersey law, this Oregon law, potentially something coming out of Washington, between that and pistol stabilizing braces, that's where the next two war fronts, the battlefields, are going to be in the Second Amendment. I think they're going to be fought over those two issues.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I definitely want to be on some form of playing ground, which is why we're definitely going to get those resources that you have out that we talked about, those organizations that are actually already in the fight, because it's nothing like, if they have a pivoting point, it makes sense for us to join that pivoting point rather than recreate the wheel, reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely. And listen, this is all politics. All of this is politics. And I in a previous lifetime before being a lawyer, I used to run campaigns, and money is king in politics. Money is king. So anytime you can help the Second Amendment Foundation, the Firearms Policy Coalition, the Gun Owners of America, maybe there's the local organization in your state. The Oregon Firearms Federation is a big group that's fighting like hell down in Oregon. There was a group in Iowa, I don't recall off the top of my name, but they just got a constitutional amendment passed in Iowa that guarantees the right of their citizens to keep and bear arms and put strict scrutiny analysis language into the Constitutional Amendment. It's a brilliant piece of legal writing. That's a private organization of volunteers in Iowa. I mean, boy, there's a worthwhile organization. If you live in Iowa, to kick into them, they're doing great work. So find those organizations, people, the local ones, the national ones, but the ones I mentioned to on a national level, they're the ones that are really putting up the fight. And I know every state has local organizations that are doing the same thing.
Another question that we had, this is per state, per your state. In general, how are people reacting to where you guys are at based on, your laws? I know y'all like next door neighbors.
Yeah, no, you got one of two reactions. You got those who don't know anything about guns and, what's the big deal? We're saving lives. We needed to do that. And then you have all of us in the 2A community, which is like, this is ridiculous. The big issue that we are fighting like holy hell on right now is our magazine ban that went into effect July 1st of this year, 10-round magazine limitation. Now, unlike a lot of other states that had a flat-out ban, Washington was a little smart and allowed us to grandfather in all of the magazines that we owned prior to that. So, like I went out and bought magazines for firearms I don't even own yet, but I got it all before
Yeah.
and got it in under the bell. But that is an issue that has a lot of people fired up, and I'm about to sit down as soon as we're done and shoot a video because our Attorney General just filed lawsuit against a gun store in this state that was selling magazines that exceeded that capacity. So one of the things that the Attorney General's office has been arguing on all of these constitutional challenges in our state is, well, there's no actual prejudice here. There's no standing because they haven't been busted for anything. And that's been their argument on everything. Well, that argument they just ruined today because now we have a plaintiff, Federal Way Firearms, or Federal Way Discount Firearms. They can show actual injury. They're being sued by the Attorney General because they sold a 30-round magazine.
Oh, wow. And this was like after the law passed? How long have y'all had that law?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I will tell you that they were a little blatant about it. They kind of did it with two middle fingers in the air a little bit.
Oh, gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
It wasn't like, I didn't realize I had done that. No, they were very aware. But again, what they're saying is, hey, we believe the law is unconstitutional and we're going to sell this to you anyways. And now we have a plaintiff who absolutely positively can establish injury because the Attorney General is saying it's $7,500 for every magazine that they sold that exceeded 10 rounds, and they believe they've sold as many as 30 magazines that exceeded that. Well, that's going to bankrupt that store.
Yeah. Wow. And I'm glad you brought out that point because state for state, I'm sure people want to know when those things, like if you're in one of those hot states with those hot messes going on regards to the law, how do they do like that company did? Do they do something to challenge it that puts at risk so they can have a legal process that can possibly take it to the Supreme Court?
Right. So a lot of times when a person wants to challenge a law, let's say you and I both think this one law is just a complete pile of crap, okay? We don't necessarily just get to challenge a law because we don't like it. Okay, we actually have to have a little bit of skin in the game, or what they call standing. So if you and I want to challenge the magazine ban because we don't like it, we may or may not have standing. If you're getting prosecuted, however, for possessing an unlawful magazine, you absolutely have standing because the law is in fact inflicting injury on you. And if it's an unconstitutional law, then you're being injured unconstitutionally. So what the Attorney General did for us here today, I talked to the lawyer who's representing this firearms company. He called me literally as they were being served, and we were excited. We're like, oh my God, he just handed us one of the best arguments that they had. He just literally shot it in the foot.
Gotcha.
Actually, he kind of shot it in the head now that I think about it,
Yeah, because I think about things like, okay, so we be in Florida. We got a lot of relaxed stuff going on, but I'm gonna tell you something that's kind of peculiar if you don't have access to private range. A lot of our gun ranges, you can go there, you can shoot like you need, but some of the top regulations and this is their own preference, per range. Some of the top preferences you can have, no matter what license you carry, Some don't allow it at all. They say no rapid fire, and this is not even with a fully automatic machine gun. This is you
Right.
just being able to, put rounds in. And the realistic thing, if I'm a train like I fight and fight like I train, how can I do such a thing with you making these limitations? If you're a gun advocate, there should be some open door for that. But neither here nor there, because that's just your shop, and you have the right to set up, your own rules in your
Yeah.
own house, accordingly, which is inspiring me to actually start some ranges.
Right.
But say other things like that same thing state-wise is like we got all these capabilities. People walk into gun stores and walk out the same day with all kinds of legal, firearms that some states can't even blink at.
Yeah.
And yet, you got these type of handicaps. Another point some people brought up was, say for instance, getting the ATF situation involved. You got a suppressor, it's registered, you're good to go. You go to a range, somebody from the range, not a random, but somebody from the range, not an ATF, and even the ATF, to my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think I even heard either you or one of the other lawyers say it, but doesn't have the right to do nothing but ask me information that at that point I can just be like, I am not answering any questions.
Leave me alone.
Without my lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm good. I got all my stuff together, and anything I need to do, if I had to do something with paperwork, I'm ready to go. However, with that being said, you got cases like that, that people want to be more familiar with and stuff like that, as far as executing their thing.
Yeah.
It's
Well, listen, advice to anybody whenever you're being questioned by law enforcement. Okay. And it really does. A lot of people are like, but I didn't do anything wrong. And you're right. You probably didn't do anything wrong. But remember that when law enforcement is questioning you in that fashion, they don't think that you're innocent of something. They are already have an idea in their mind. And anything you say that could be taken out of context will lead to what William Shakespeare called the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And so honesty is a wonderful quality to have as a human being. No one should ever change that. However, when you're being confronted by police, silence is a much better quality to have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely agree. Indeed. It's like, hey, whether it's a speeding ticket or otherwise, you tell me what you need from your officer. Other than that, I'm using my right to remain silent.
Absolutely.
Either way.
Use it or lose it.
Indeed. All right, so that's I think we've covered most of the general 2A question. Is there any outline or something that you would want to say other that you haven't already said to the community to express your final words on the whole issue?
It's this. It's that I think that the concept of being responsible for your own protection, your own safety, and your family's security is the ultimate form of liberty, which is the very concept upon which our country was founded. And it is a concept that is significantly under attack right now. It has never been more under attack than it is right now. And it is the duty, the moral obligation of everybody in the lawful and responsible gun-owning community to educate those that need the education so that they understand how important our Second Amendment rights really are. I think that we do that by continuing to educate ourselves. I think that we should always be on the quest to learn more, but we should always be willing to educate others. We should be patient because we're going to get a lot of dumb questions from people who don't know what they're talking about, but that's fine because you asked the same dumb questions years ago yourself. But let's get these people educated. The second thing is I'm thrilled with all the work I see people doing at the ranges all the time to keep themselves out of the morgue. Let's do the same work to keep ourselves out of prison, okay? Because if you survive an incident, but you end up in prison for 20 years, I don't know which one is worse, to be honest with you. And if you're ever looking for a tool to just kind of, hey, I wonder what's going on with this issue, I wonder what the ATF says about this, yeah, check us out at Washington Gun Law. I think we've done a really good job of giving you objective information. We don't try to slant things one way or the other, and we don't try to get people to think a certain way. You're all big boys and big girls. You can think for yourselves. We just want to give you true objective information, and then you decide what you want to do with that.
Sounds awesome. Sounds awesome. And just to displace, basically, as I've shared with you before, one of our things is we have a news channel on our YouTube where we share items from items from other law or non-law, just law-abiding citizens, current news, things like that, issues that are going on. We try to keep that on there so people be aware of all of these situations going on from New Jersey to California to Oregon, etc. And keep that posted. So definitely, if you guys want to check out WashingtonGunLaw.com. You got any questions? His people are very good. We thank you for your time, for us reaching out to you.
Hey, Professor, thanks for having me on, man. This was fun.
Hey, we look forward to doing some other panels. Like I say, some of those other subjects, this is not going to be an extended, but like you were saying about the NRA, one of the comments that I wanted to make on that, which is funny, I did a lot of following from them. I was a member years ago.
Yeah.
I got some of my training.
Every day.
Yeah, but nowadays it's crazy because they are not as the biggest voices that was in the industry as they used to be. Maybe because all the flack that they had to do and some other issues that I think.
They're a poorly run organization.
Yeah,
Every time I get that phone call from them, hey, this is Sue with the NRA. I'm like, hey, Sue, I'm just going to stop you right now. I'm going to make it real simple on you. The minute you guys fire Wayne LaPierre, you call me back and I'll write you guys a check. But until you make a change at the top, I ain't doing it. I'm not doing it. Okay? I don't think that organization is well run. I think politically they do a bad job. I think financially they mismanage things. I think it's all become about Wayne and not about you and me. It's supposed to be about you and me, not about Wayne. That's why I like Second Amendment Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, Silent Majority Foundation, because they do make it about you and me and not about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. So I'll hit you up at a later time.
I'll shoot you an email here this evening. I'll send you over the links to those 4 organizations that we talked about, okay?
Awesome. And looking forward to speaking with you again one day.
Anytime,
until
brother.
then,
Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, sir.
Take care.
And we
Stay
thank
safe
everybody
now.
for tuning in. Appreciate you. Y'all have a good evening.
States that a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of the people